Hey, what's up guys? Another tutorial with lower body mechanics. So very similarly to the upper body, the lower body also has two joints. It's called the pelvic girdle when it's combined, but you have two hip joints, right? And then you have one spine that's connecting to the center of your sacrum, right? And we call that the pelvic girdle. Now, very similarly as the upper body, the lower body also moves in a flexion, an extension, in so many different ways that are so similar, and a lot of people call the lower body the upper body of the body, or the upper body the lower half of the upper body. However you want to view it, it works very similarly, and just having some simple fundamental mechanics to apply to a lot of the movements, such as the squat, the deadlift, a lunge, all these different variations of a lower body exercise. Taking these staples and applying them to your exercises can be the difference between 10 pounds and 30 pounds, and ultimately executing and performing without injury. So with the pelvic girdle, it is different from every individual. As a tall person like myself, I'm going to have a longer humeral head where there's a socket in the femur and there's a head. There's a head with a socket, and then there's a neck, right? So for somebody who's taller, I'm going to have a longer neck. So what that's going to do, it's going to point my legs inwardly. So for me, when I'm squatting, I have to change my footing position. But for somebody who is maybe 5'8", 5'7", their femoral neck isn't as long, so they don't come at an angle as much. They still do come at an angle, because that is the function of this head, is to move in this circumductional movement and really just rotate in that joint the whole time. So how do we optimize the lower body? How do we optimize a squat or a deadlift? Very simple. One of the things I like to do is I like to stand straight. I like to make sure that I'm shoulder width apart with my feet. And when I know I'm right there, I'm going to what I call stomp the grapes. So something very simple. You stand like you normally would, and you start to move your feet up and down. And at first it might seem silly, but what it really does, it actually neutralizes your pelvic floor by default. And when you do that for a few steps, you'll notice that your width naturally widens out a little bit more. So that's your natural pelvic girdle. So before you go on to any of these other cues or tips, try doing that first and perform the overhead squat. That's one of the lower body assessments for us to do. So now, if you are not able to get down to a 90-degree angle, or sitting in a position comfortably as if there's a chair behind you, then maybe some of these tricks might be able to help you. So now for me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my footing position because I'm taller. So every one of these moves can be manipulated to your advantage. And so now, another thing I like to talk about is footing position, or though both feet are straight, and whereas being straight, you can actually change them outwardly to manipulate your pelvic floor so that you can go from a standing position to a 90-degree angle. And so I'll say point your feet 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock, just slightly, because what that's going to do, that's going to open up your pelvic floor for you to get down to a deeper squat and be able to have that same range of motion coming back up. Because what you do in the beginning is that's how you're going to finish, and that's how you're going to return back to that position. Right? So a lot of times you'll hear in the gym or maybe at some training center, whatever. Maybe you'll hear stick your butt out, keep your chest up. But that's what's going to actually put more stress on your spine by making your discs pinch, throw your midsection off, and not stabilize it so that it's strong enough to withhold 300, 500 pounds, or whatever you're lifting at that point. So back to making sure that our midsection is braced. We want to make sure that we are taking a big breath and that we're bracing for impact and making sure that this midsection is as tight as possible, right? So whereas the other video I talked about bracing for impact as if somebody's going to come up and punch you in the gut, you're going to make sure that that is tight, right? So we're starting from the ground up. That's what I like to call it. From the feet, stopping the grapes, getting that pelvic floor as neutral as possible, and making sure that we are bracing ourselves for impact. And if the footing position doesn't work for you, that is totally okay. These are just some tips that helped me in order for my 90-degree angle range of motion to actually happen for me. Because with full range of motion, we have so much more development, and not only muscle development, but also joint health as well. So everything really initiates from the stomach. So that's why it's really important to have a tight midsection, not only for looks, although that is good, but also for this functionality that we really need to brace ourselves as we're pushing back up from a squatting or a deadlifting position. So 3 things to remember in this video is to stomp the grapes, making sure that our midsection is tight, and then our footing position, we can go ahead and manipulate it to how we want it to be, whether that's going to be a wider base, right, with a 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, or a moderate base with a 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock. Feel that out and try it with the next squat assessment.